And Kyrut said, in no matter what times men live, they'll say, we live in strange times.
And Kyrut said, this one guy had the beginning of a concept, but it just wouldn't gel. So he called it the it just won't gel concept.
Then Kyrut unveiled today's happy description. Man's secondary world is a form of verbal leapfrog.
And Kyrut said, what the revolutionist mind knows flows organically and comes not from study.
And Kyrut mumbled, everybody at the bus station wants to take somebody with them.
And Kyrut said, even in lands that allow no games of chance, a man with an ordinary mind has his own lottery.
And Kyrut remarked, in a more complex neural web, the more you think of I, the closer you are to death. Or something even worse.
And Kyrut noted, conversation number 64, I will not fall into the pit of stupidity alone. That's right, you don't have to.
And Kyrut said, the sane will lie to themselves. An artist won't admit it.
A fellow with a fairly active mind retorts, when you get right down to it, isn't it actually impossible to lie to oneself? Well, sure, sir, but everyone knows that, and nobody does.
One man's latest notion, the reason many people do talk so much is because they have nothing to say. Kind of puts a wrap on it, huh?
And Kyrut said, many people get all excited just so they can say they're excited. Some of you may remember this idea when it was an act that went under the name of pro and con. Another neat thing about being booked by life, said a certain juggler, is that it doesn't waste your time fooling around with those 10% commissions. Good old life, God bless it, simply takes everything you've got.
And Kyrut said, in an interview, this one reality explained its ability to stay in power so long in these words. It's all a matter of well-placed headaches and relentless crowd control.
Enter classroom byplay. If you can count, you can think. But what if you don't know any numbers? Doesn't matter.
After some years of studying life and its several salient aspects, this one chap now says, short ideas are just like long ones, but shorter and better.
And Kyrut said, everyone's part of an act.
And Kyrut said, it's easy to make the king mad. All you have to do is frighten him. The guards by the doors are to keep away disturbing ideas from the throne. Dear Father dear, asked a lad, just what constitutes disturbing ideas? Well, my boy, can you spell originality?
And Kyrut said, the history of this other neural universe is replete with stories of those who offered to sell snakes faux wings so that they could avail themselves of the sparrow's matinee discount. A gentleman writes the program. Okay, here's another one for you. What's the actual difference between offering to and trying to? Item. Why is it that creatures with 2 feet insist on a lifetime's information about either the right or the left?
This morning's debate in the park went like this. First speaker says, A people's culture is uniquely exemplary and revealing. Yes, replied his opposition, just as hair will grow on a man's chest, but not in his mouth.
Near a busy intersection, a chap confronted a policeman and told him point blank, "Those who believe that men invent fiction will believe anything, will believe, dear sir, anything."
And Kairut said, under ruler of my heart, one guy filed his own photograph. Hey, that's how it's supposed to be.
And Kairut said, there is, in fact, a man who says that in life's literary efforts, as its non-fiction output is the primary world, its fiction is man and the secondary.
Then turning to the F section of Saturday's city paper, Kairut read a religious item concerning a new church that has sprung up over in the 3rd Ward, which has as one of its tenets the belief that when the gods want a man to suffer, they will cause him to be born and be serious. Then immediately after hearing this, several people thought, what the hell's so new about that? Which is always easy to say once you've heard a fresh comment regarding an old subject about which you are already suspicious.
But, complained the mayor's oldest son, if brains could cry, we could all be poets.
Through a non-commercial grant, we are now able to bring you this one guy's latest theory. Time can't get drunk, which is why men do. Be sure and support our sponsors, or they say they'll come and rip your guts out. What is mortal existence without encouragement?
Then Kairut noted the political equity of man's emotional life and height chart. In a binary world, everybody has somebody to look down on.
And Kairut said, human hormones, cleverly disguised as beliefs and convictions, are like kidnapped children all men are required to hold, even though they don't snatch them in the first place, and even though no one is ever coming forth to cough up a ransom.
And one man pleaded with himself, "Please, just let me go and I promise I'll never come back."
A certain professor of grammar and rhetoric says he finds it very, very interesting that the words whore and habit both start with the same letter.
Sometimes, just to cheer himself up, this one God would remind himself, without me, there'd be no such thing as an oxymoron. Ha! He'd then smile and say, ha, and double ha.
And Kairut said, if you don't want to know about a thing that interests you in short, concise bursts, then it's just a hobby. Consider how astronomy magazines give greater coverage to enthusiast conventions than to stargazing.
And Kairut said, although normal city kings find artists unreliable, impertinent, and ultimately unnecessary, they also find them strangely attractive. And Mama Italy cautioned the kids, now Milan, don't you in Naples be fightin'.
And one man thought, if all of me was as fascinating as some of me is to me, I'd be a triple delighted sight for me to see. And a certain king counter-thought, and that is one reason that all civilized kingdoms are divided into states and provinces, so that no one lesser entity ever becomes too strong.
And a certain universe counter-thought. And also why I do not allow artists to have nuclear pianos or ballistic paintbrushes.
by way of an endearing young charm, this one man, whenever he'd refer to himself, wouldn't.
After more than 6 hours of surgery, the neurologist met the waiting press just outside the operating room, and as he removed his bloodied gown, gave this statement: "As of the moment, Mr. Carlyle is stabilized and doing well. We removed a tumor from his brain the size of a brain." And after a long head-scratching pause, the doctor muttered, "Rats," and rushed back into the OR.
Then a gentleman offers us a notation regarding Newton's eighth undiscovered law of emotion. If I'm pissed, why should anyone have fun?
The speaker concluded with these words: "And once art has become a question of profit, it is no more than a common trade." And a lad in the audience was struck. Same also with thinking. And so one might ask oneself, if the neural revolution is not art, then what, pray tell, might it, etc., and so on.
And Kyrut said, "Hormones don't sweat."
And Kyrut said, "Governments and the other various institutions are the secondary world's version of the primary's herd instinct."
And since no one had written to him yet tonight, the advice doctor went ahead with this answer for which he'd received no question. Ignorance is a cure without an illness.
Two strangers waiting by an empty field fell into conversation. "It's fascinating," said one, "how the human mind works." "And," inquired the other, "how is that?" "I don't know," he replied.
Then the old barker Kyrut worked the crowd thusly: "A man in a house of mirrors can't be cornered, not if he built it himself." And upon hearing this, one young lad immediately turned to himself and said, "Quick, look at me. Is there anything reflective going on?"
As the city stretched, then rolled back over to catch a few extra minutes' worth, this one man exclaimed, "I am no rosebud, no Pop-Tart. I am a man, and I can take it on the chin. In fact, if it's your chin, I can take it 3 or 4 more times."
And Kyrut said, "An idea that will not fly without a modifier is not revolutionist."
The headline of the neo-historical news item was, "The logic of local sequence eventually prevails, even over religious myths." Before the flood, there was a giant race of people, and afterwards, there was a lot of large drowned bodies.
And Kyrut said, "Telling what kind of guy you are and giving your thoughts on the secondary world is one way to polish up a good shine on your own intellectual rust. Pop quiz time. What's more fun than finding a cobra in your bed? Finding 2.
Tip for princes: you can never replace your old man on the throne until you can suffer more than him. And a viewer sent this note: "No matter what kind of weird ideas you try to put in my head through your show, I at least have the comfort of knowing that a man's brain has no actual feeling. I read that in a book. Sincerely yours.
A kid said to an old man, "You ever notice that the more things change, the more people want to talk about change?" Public service announcement. Is it not nice that at no additional cost we are provided with gasolines that not only fuel our vehicles, but make their own unbecoming noises as well?
EVOAPK, expanded version of a previous Kairut. A neural revolutionist would want to die alone, out of town, with no luggage.
One man confided to a neighbor, "My lesser thoughts are like mules, pigs, even chickens in the yard." And, inquired his friend, "What are your greater ones like?" "Greater ones?" he yelled. "Greater ones? You mean to tell me there can be greater ones?"
Math maxim for the mentally mutated. The greater the importance a mind places on institutions and collective wisdom, the less it will place on itself. Of course, injected the mayor, this is the way it is intended to be. This is civilization. Okay, everybody who wants to be a hermit, raise your hand.
And a correspondent notes, to be civilized is, in a certain manner, to impose on yourself.
From the curious recesses of his chosen alleyway, the Whisper Man sends this message. If man were not as miraculously flexible as he is, his many complaints about life would have by now broken him. And a viewer writes, I think I know who the answer man really is.
And Kairut observed, in the civilized stalking, the secondary of the primary, it is not seen, but often the prey that is slain has already butchered the hunter.
Item. Life expends little genetic energy in sending alligators to college.
Item. In one dominion, the royal zoo was composed entirely of the king's relatives.
And another correspondent writes to us, thanks to the ideas I picked up from your program, I've got it now figured out like this. Life writes and produces the records. Our minds get an FCC license, and our tongues become the DJ.
Two guys were sitting around a dried-up lake bed, and the first one said, "Let's play a game. I'll ask a question and you try to answer it." "Okay," replied the second guy. "Who was the original inspiration for the phrase, 'as bullheaded as Zeus after a 50-day fast'?" And after the second guy had been silent for a long time, the first one said, "Okay, then just guess what letter the person's name starts with." And the second guy offered, "R?" And the first one said, "That's right." And the second guy wondered, "R who?"
And Kairut said, we must all share the blame. There is no blame.
A Kairut revisited, and more. Hormones don't sweat. Now for the more. The primary world doesn't sweat. Say, hold it a minute, objects a viewer. This physical aspect of man's existence certainly does literally sweat. Yes, we know, and that's just the point.
During their weekly court devotional, the royal priests pronounced, "We each have our burden to bear." And the plump young prince whined to himself, "Yeah, but I've got me."
In his desire, as he put it, to get the cheap stuff in his life out of the way and done with, This one man killed himself. A certain fashionable gentleman in one city joined in by noting, "I don't mind hearing fun made of humanity, just so long as it doesn't apply to me." And then Bordeaux admitted, "Yes, it is difficult to try to be where I am and spend part of the summer months in Saint-Tropez."
As the judge and prosecuting attorney danced, they talked. "The successful crime is the crime undetected," said the magistrate. "Ah, so, and the same too with ignorance," replied his partner as he dipped his grace.
Then for the Let's Pretend Kitty's Corner segment of our show, Kairoot made up the following. A viewer writes our show, "Dear Kairoot, throughout the history of man on this planet, how many people do you think have actually known what was going on?" Okay, for those of you who wonder if this is a trick question or not, if the one asking the question knows the answer, then it is.
And Kairoot noted, man's routine belief in free will is a variation of the classic gambit of tyrants, whereby the people are allowed to go through the motions of voting, but their ballots are never tallied. 4 kings, 6 priests, a rabbi, and an insurance adjuster tell us that this has nothing whatsoever to do with them.
And Kairoot said, "The only true story man has ever told changes from moment to moment. It is the only one possible."
And Kairoot said, "In a trailer over near an unlisted school for lambs lives a chap who thinks to himself, 'We're all captives of our genes, except those who know it and don't care.' P.S. If you believe there is any way out of this, then you're the sort of fish who'd see the openings between the strands as the heart of a net. P.P.S. If you are this sort, let me hear from you." And a viewer writes, "You know, the more I don't understand what you're talking about, the more I seem to like it. Weird, huh?"
And Kairoot said, "When the primary and secondary worlds pass, they often nod or salute one another. More often there is something else they would like to do."
A viewer who used to correspond with the king while waiting at a busy intersection in the city park near the speaker's area to meet a certain old man and his kid, saw the king pass by and thought, "Boy, what a Kairoot this could make."
Someone who's been recently following these proceedings has this to say: "The more I listen to you and personally ponder the notion of some form of unusual, original, rebellious thinking, it feels to me more and more that it would entail a kind of ice-cold ideas."
And Kairoot said, "The weak repent, a rebel stops."
And Kairoot said, "Once upon a time, during a strange little period in their history, the king proposed that the love sonnet business be taken from the hands of printers and poets and given over to hormones. Well, such a hue and cry went up across the land that many of the decent people would turn to one another and say, 'Where the hell did all the hewing and crying come from?'" Late charges. The praises of certain bodily fluids do not have to be sung, since they are the mother of all romantic odes.
And the Credit Card Center forwards us this letter from a viewer. If the obvious becomes any more obvious, will Kairoot be changing his name?
The head of the resistance movement said to the troops and followers, "We have nothing to fear but ourselves." And that don't count for bird squat.
According to a certain old legend, this one band of explorers, even before they got all the way out of town, killed and ate their king, priest, financiers, and anybody else who looked funny.
And a viewer writes, would a real neural revolutionist be logical? Dear viewer, are you ready to totally revise the L section of your dictionary?
The sanity of the secondary world is its protection.
And a lad asked his dad, when I grow up, can I go unprotected?
The sanity of the revolutionist is in being unprotected.
One man says that sometimes when he's out for a run, they'll put a guy who looks just like him up to running toward him from the opposite direction.
God bless us. So, whatever happened to Ox Baker with those eyebrows? You remember him? I mean, the man was like 7 feet tall, 400 pounds, but that was nothing. You see his eyebrows and you think, good evening in TV land. Bring you up to date right quick. Those of you watching this, we are taping on the nights we are taping. On the nights we're not, it's irrelevant. We're taping here right outside the Cherokee Reservation in Oklahoma City. We are taping an hour at a time, but we have been informed that in some cities, I don't want to name them, but in some cities, they're only picking up a half hour at a time, the second half hour. So to bring you up to date, the first 30 minutes normally of the programs are taken up by reading. There's a group of different papers every night, and they start off in Cox Said, and after that are like little proverbs, maxims, adages, epitaphs, fables, legends, myths, miscellaneous. And as they're being read, so each page has a number, and as they're being read, the studio audience here has access right off screen. Right off camera is a screen that flashes the appropriate number as it's being read, and for those that hear it and it strikes their fancy, they write down the number, it is put on a list, and then the second part of the show, more or less, is I get the list and I come up here and I, so to speak, have only heard them for the first time also. And so I come up here and I look at it, and Cairo, never been on camera, but it's sort of, I see what's been requested, and then, if the Spirit hits me, I attempt to expositionize a bit more on those what have been requested. So that's the way it goes. By the way, they wanted me to also announce that it is not suggested that people watch this program who have a degree in theology, psychology, sociology, accounting, the law, or TV and VCR repair. Or anyone else holding a high school diploma. And even more specifically, they have pointed out that it is not recommended that anyone watch this program who, based on a standard SB test, scores an IQ number of more than 80 or less than 40. So, I have done my duty. All right, now, and I will read the one so that you people know which ones we're trying to, that we're considering making some comment thereupon, or expositionizing for those of you who live in large cities and perhaps damn near finished high school. Well, either that or you're in a job that deals in bureaucracies. And Kairut said, there was a man who thought to himself, if all of me was as fascinating as some of me is to me, then I'd be a triple delight sight for me to see. And then a certain king counterthought, king representing, I think, to Kairut, sort of the central core, the stabilized aspect of your own thinking, oftentimes known amongst the ordinary educated as your own personality, your individuality. It is, no one wants to think about, but it can be, I know nobody wants to hear it. Well, it doesn't mean anything. It can be traced down, narrowed down without any doubt to your brain. You all know that. Just the slightest accident and you've got no individuality. Don't worry about psychological problems and, well, I knew that the traumas of my childhood would finally catch up. No, that's just dragging it out. If you want to be done with it, me or any good carpenter that's been around with a hammer and a screwdriver can take care of your personal problems just like that. It's a lot cheaper than having to go into actual surgery at a hospital for a lobotomy, even if you could find somebody that would do it nowadays. And this certain king thought, after he heard, you remember where we were, this one guy who thought, if all of me was as fascinating as some of me is to me, I'd be a triple delight sight for me to see. And this king thought. And that is one of the reasons that all civilized kingdoms are divided up into states, provinces, precincts, wards, so that no one lesser entity ever becomes too strong. What is sanity to a king? What is sanity to ordinary, civilized, decent, sane, sequential, logical thinking? I'm not going to answer the question directly. Put it to you in response more in line with this. What would be dangerous affronts? What would be dangerous possibilities of agitated mobs to one's thinking? It would be if, let us say that you were, we'll just pick out one. If you are, which example would you like? Would you like it in the musical realm or the political realm? Musical. All right. Let us say it's just that people do not seem to be, it's just as prevailing, having to do with civilized growth. People whose primary hobby would be music do not seem to be quite as passionate about it as those in the political area. But I'll go ahead and use music. Let us say that someone who is just darn near fanatical in their love of the Romantic period. Let us say that in one area of their thinking, the Romantic era of music in the Western world is their king. What if a competing interest, how about the Baroque period or the Classical period? What if that became too strong? I guess I got too strange. I'll get back crude now. What if someone they found themselves, we won't worry about how they got there. We suddenly find a man who is strident in his political views on the right side. A conservative, reactionary, right-wing political person. Ordinary person. What if the opposition, the last Kairu of the night, for those of you, I don't know whether anybody requested it, but could I just read it again? One man says that sometimes when he's out for a run, they'll put a guy who looks just like him up to running towards him from the opposite direction. What if in this man's neural kingdom, this right-wing person, and it could be a left-wing, I'll get to that. What if, ordinary people don't know this, if the man is, if it's political, to use that example, if he is right-wing in his thinking, if he's conservative, there is a person who looks just like him that could run from the opposite direction. The reason this is in Cairo, you never heard it before, is ordinary people can't see him. He's invisible. If there was not something to diminish the potential power, I guess I should get cruder. A person in their mental, the drive, the energy that runs the mind, let's use the politics. A man is conservative, and that, the best he can have, is that 50% of the fuel running him. There is an equal amount that says, this is ridiculous. There's an equal amount that says, nah, we should be liberal. If that 50% actually could coalesce, could stay stable as much as what seems to be his individuality, his primary view, the man would be in, I think it's known in psychology, he would be in a dither. The man would be in personal gridlock. The man would look like a possum on speed. The world, and we're not worried, of course, about an individual necessarily, but the world would not function if, well, you can take it as an individual, but then look at large groups of people. The large groups of people stand and say, well, we're in favor of taking this kind of political action here in our fine country, in our kingdom, or this economic. And they stand up. And as soon as they say that, all of them, this is the easy way, all of them go, yeah, but on the other hand. You got it? All right, half of them get up and say, here's what we should do. Half of the decent, sane people. And the other half hear them out and then go, okay, we agree except for this. You're absolutely wrong. Nothing would happen. You would have the two-party political system, which is simply a form of polarized energy manifestation, that running a three-dimensional mind. Nothing would happen. Thus, this king counterthinks that this guy says, if all of me was as fascinating as some of me is to me, I'd be a triple delight sight for me to see. That is sort of a dirty trick to start off with, because what the guy is actually thinking would be more in line of a more complex view. It'd be more of an original attempt, be more at a form of rebellious thought. That is, well, parts of me, of course he says me, but he's talking about his thinking. Because if he's talking about any less than that, he's not worth talking about. He'd be talking about, well, if I looked better, if I was fatter, if I was thinner, if I had a smaller nose. Nothing wrong with that, but that's not worth discussing. You got plastic surgery, you got the YMCA, you got Nutra trim or whatever the hell it is. Go pay somebody to help you lose weight. That's not what we're talking about. The guy says, if all of me was as fascinating as some of me, what he's saying is, if what I think, if the operations of my mind, which is what makes me an individual, is what makes me human, if all of it was as fascinating as little pieces of it, Jesus, what a delight I would be to me. And of course, what he's saying is, well, I'll put words in his mouth. He's saying, I would be an original. I would be a neural artist. I would be an intellectual revolutionist. I would be having more fun to myself than I'm sure the Southern Baptists want me to have if they knew about it and could prove it. And then the king points out, yeah, but that ain't the way it works, Buster. We have to keep it split up. Divide and conquer. Divide and stay on the throne. And there's nothing wrong, because an ordinary person must do that. An ordinary person could not. Maybe when I can back up and you see where I was going, or what I was trying to point to. If an ordinary person had strong convictions, and you're supposed to if you're ordinary, strong convictions in music, art, whatever interests you, choice of automobiles. I know some of you people who actually did perhaps finish high school may find it unusual, but there were people in certain areas of the world at one time would almost fight over the fact of someone speaking up in favor of a Ford automobile. And right down the bar was a man and his brothers, 2 or 3 of his brothers, all of them with the same name. Nothing but General Motors people. And you could have fights over that. The kind of convictions, the kind of beliefs, and of course you get more serious and talk about a man's religious beliefs, his cultural, nationalistic, racial pride, and all that. But his ideas, he would not be sane, literally. He could not be sane by the ordinary definitions if he says, yes, I am so-and-so. And without going into specifics of all the kind of minor hobbies of politics and economics and nationalistic pride, he could just say, yes, I am Fernando. And suddenly half his brain says, yes, and I am anti-Fernando. You got serious problems. Don't worry about these people that have 18 personalities in one body. You know, you can end up on TV with that or get on your own talk show. If you just got 2, they're going to put you away. You're just frozen. You could not operate. The king points out that you cannot have the kind of happiness, you cannot have the kind of delight the guy was, about which he was speculating, by having all of your thinking move in such a way grow in such a way that it is as much fun as every little bit of it. I mean, every little teeny bit that you sometimes have. Like last time we were mentioning that all kings start out wanting to be artists. The king would have stayed along those lines. That if he could have begun to expand, that my thinking, what I do, continues to be as much fun. It gets more and more fun. The little bits I used to have, the little flashes I had, they get bigger and bigger. You reach a certain point, and they get non-bigger and non-bigger. You grow up and become a Philistine. You grow up and settle down. You grow up and your thinking is not that much fun anymore. You become your own intellectual, speaking, you become your own precinct, ward, province, dominion, nation, city, state, and like that. And Kairos said, well, and then the old barker Kairos worked the crowd thusly. A man in the house of mirrors can't be cornered, not if he built it. Upon hearing this, a young lad immediately turned to himself and said, quick, look at me. Is there anything reflective going on? If this was an ordinary person, if you followed any of this, we'll assume it has some metaphorical possibility. It would be a man who, in a sense, with his thinking, had refrained, had in some way been able to keep his intellectual kingdom from being split up into all of the precincts and domains and fiefdoms, dukedoms. He could be as, there would be no corner to the kingdom, that he could not be driven. I don't mean somebody else. It might appear to be that way, the easiest one to see, but he couldn't do it to himself. Well, if he couldn't do it to himself, he wouldn't, but quick. He could not be cornered, such as, I got to play with reality right quick and start off. This is not the way it'd be, but a guy saying, yes, there's a conversation going on. He says, yes, I am as liberal as they come. I am a Democrat. I am a Whig. I am a Tory. I'm a liberal. And somebody else says, well, let me show you the folly of your ways. No, try to make me make it up. And they just, in some way, come out with an argument that strikes a man about Jesus. They present in such a way right quick that anybody who would be a liberal in this conditions, politically, is an ass. So there you are, and you have to go, well, Now, everybody knows you can get cornered in life, which is why the gods have provided rude Italian gestures and profanity and a back door, or to suddenly get drunk and fall down. You can corner yourself. That is the nature, and that's what is attempted to be being done by cutting up the kingdom, by the king not being able or not being subject to the fact that he might be as delighted as he used to be, that there could be an exponential growth of what he used to enjoy thinking, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger to where he didn't really look upon what he was doing as factionalized. If you had no division in what you thought, then you couldn't be cornered. It would be a house of mirrors. Because I guess I'm assuming by the hand gesture that some people at least would find it interesting to think about that might possibly be an advantage. Of course, if you're ordinary, you might listen and think, Jesus, who'd want to live there? I don't know where I'm going. Well, I told you not to watch. I told you 15 minutes ago you shouldn't have watched. Anybody that thinks that, I know darn well that you probably got a high school education, so you ought to turn it off. So don't blame me. Well, it comes back to other ways that many Kairos have been pointed out. What if you could think without the necessity of a conclusion? And I guess Kairos and I brought that up enough that many people, but now we go, yeah. But think about it. That is, it's not some kind of psychological trick, and it's not because there's a flaw in what other people do, but the flow of energy is such, the kind of gasoline, the kind of operation of an internal combustion engine the same way, not that dissimilar, so that you people who may have had a tumor won't take it personally. Not dissimilar to the thinking of the human brain in the sense that here it is in a 3D context run by polarized energy. So that you would not think that the ordinary mind could not conceive of the fact that you could think without a conclusion. And what I was going to say, rather than worry about the word conclusion in the sense that it would be an incorrect conclusion. You can't conceive of the fact this mind can't, when energy is running it and it's polarized, that, all right, I'm thinking, but where's it going? That would be a house of mirrors. That would be a place in which you could not be cornered. And there is no way to sell that, because if I tried to do that to an ordinary person, they heard any of it, even metaphorical, they'd go, Jesus, not only are you crazy, no, you're trying to drive me nuts. But you couldn't think like that. Or if you tried, I don't see the point in it. That's why you should go back to school at night and get your diploma. An expanded version of one that was from last time. Several people, well, doesn't matter, didn't ask for it last time and for some reason thought about it and sent notes tonight. The other version, I don't have it here, but the other version was more or less this: that just like dumb ideas, revolutionists would like to die alone. And so tonight, Kairut gave the expanded version of a previous one. And it's not all that different, but this time he says, when you're a revolutionist, we want to die alone, out of town, with no luggage. The previous one's just as good, it's the same thing. I suggest. The Spirit is making me suggest. If you people would send in more contributions, I'd do more of this. You know, of being moved by the Spirit or whatever it is. Just like dumb ideas, the revolutionists want to die alone. And you can add it to this: die alone, out of town, with no luggage. All right, if you're going to die in the sense of ordinary routine thinking, you could look at this as being, as always, or very often, a dirty, dirty trick. I mean, you say, just like dumb ideas, the revolutionist wants to die alone. You know. I guess I could strike somebody and you think, Jesus, that for some reason even sounds neat, or it's curious, I don't understand it. It's really a trick. To die in the revolutionist sense, you got to do it alone. Because if you do it with any luggage, if you do it at home and say, yes, I've died, you're wrong. You've repented. You didn't stop, which is another Kairut tonight, whether anybody got around to doing it, is the ordinary repent. A rebel stops. Because if you simply repent of something, all you're doing is beginning without understanding why. You begin to get a whiff of something familiar, and what it is that guy that looks just like you that they sent, and you don't really see him, but it's just this whiff of something, and here he is running towards you from the opposite direction. That's repenting. That's being a reformed drunk. To use a specific physical example. Ordinary people repent. That's why they have to talk about it. Yes, I stopped doing that. Oh, the many years I did it. Nothing wrong with it, but you haven't stopped. And if you could stop, it's not important than an ordinary person. It's just a hobby. But while the ordinary repent, a rebel would stop. And if you're going to stop, that is die, in that kind of ordinary thought, you cannot do it at home. And you can't do it with anybody, which is back to the original from last time, that just like dumb ideas, a revolutionist wants to die alone. Of course, there's another trick in there. Dumb ideas don't want to die. But the thing is, if they can die, if they could die, it would be in a revolution, in a revolutionist mind. And if they did die, he would have to be alone. Because you can't go out to a church or a synagogue or an AA meeting or a 12-step program of any kind, some recovery group. You can't go to your mama. You can't go to the king. You can't go to you and go, oh, help me, because the king will say, oh, no problem. No, you came to the right place. Anyone who finds that strange, I would suggest you pick up any old religious literature and you'll see it over and over and over and over. They just think it's something else. Walking into lions' dens, fiery furnace. Yes, come in, I'll help you. You're in the right place. You got to, I'm just using die, or Kairut did, in a very broad sense. But if you're going to die, if you're going to change the way you think, you got to do it alone. You can't have any baggage. You cannot repent, because there's nothing to repent. We all got to share the blame, was another Kairut tonight. There's one sentence, compound. It says, we all must share the blame, semicolon. There is no blame. You cannot repent. There's nothing to repent of. You cannot recover from being you. There's nothing to recover from. You cannot die in company. You cannot go to somebody and say, help me die, which is the same thing as trying to go to a religious leader or a psychologist or somebody and say, help me progress, help me change. And they say, well, certainly I will. They can help you repent. They can help you from going to being a drunk to being a verbose non-drunk. You can go from being a sinner, according to the religion, to a Christian or a Jew or a true believer, a Muslim. Or you can go from being neurotic to being, I guess they still don't like to say cured because they do. They won't get you to come back. But whatever psychiatrists are calling it, better. Yes, you're no longer absolutely psychotic. You're better. And you're a revolutionist would want to die alone, out of town, and with no luggage. As I said, it's a trick because there is no other way. Which I could suggest one more, since it seems to always get some sort of little rise when Kyrut says anything about a hermit. That, may I suggest to you, is where the idea of the hermit came from originally. People don't know why, but it's an attempt to escape, not repent from, but to in some way escape the confines of polarized energy. I'll run hide in a cave. I'll join a monastery. Which is kind of cheap. Some of them really, somewhere, years and years ago, there were humans that thought, wait a minute. There's something fishy going on here that people want to get out of the grips of ordinary life and ordinary thinking, and so they retreat. They withdraw from life, and they look up on a hill and they think, but Jesus, there's 50 of these guys got together and withdrew. Some guy somewhere, it was a small step for mankind. I just thought I'd throw in a little space reference. So one guy somewhere had to go, wait a minute, I'm a better man than that. And he thought, I know what I'll do. I won't go join them. I'll go off by myself. I'll be a hermit. Still won't work. But I suggest that's where it came from. That yes, I'll go off. Because you cannot go die in company. There's nobody can kill you in the revolutionist sense. You cannot go to a priest. You can't go to a king somewhere to tap you with a magic sword or to wave a mace around your head or to shake some kind of bells and say, now you are free from ordinary thought. If you're going to die in the revolutionist sense, the same way that would only be possible for dumb ideas, you got to do it alone. And Kyrut said, man's routine belief in, quote, free will is a variation of the classic gamut of tyrants whereby the people are allowed to go through the motions of voting, but their ballots are never tallied. I just don't know what to say about that one. Think about it. Now, you've heard it twice. The whole idea of free will, now you know that's made up. That's been the basis of wars, religiously, and all sorts of withdrawal of tenure in the world of academia over this kind of battle over freedom of will. Do we have free will? Do we not have free will? Intellectually, theoretically, religiously? I believe Kyrut, it's just my opinion, but the Spirit told me that we're close to wrapping it up. Man's routine belief in free will is a variation of the classic gamut of tyrants. A king who, has not just fallen off a Rutabaga truck. A king, and he says, all right, to calm people down, all these people getting agitated, we're going to have an election. Imagine after all these years, they all go, yay! Be calm, be civil, and he said, voting booths and all that. You can vote. Do you want me to stay or not? And he lets everybody come vote. And maybe he drives by some of the polling places, and he said, glad to see you here voting. And they all vote, and he says, we'll announce the results later. And so everybody goes home, maybe has a party, and they take all the ballots and they throw them in the fireplace. That's the end of it. Classic. You don't hear that? There is man's concept of freedom of will. You understand? It is death out of town with no baggage to the idea of freedom of will. It doesn't disprove it. It doesn't argue with it. It doesn't try to revive it. It doesn't try to prove it or disprove it. I'm telling you, that's what it's close to, or Kyrut is. And that was my spiritual interpretation, I think. Free will is like a tyrant. Will let you vote. Let you go through the whole procedure. It might take you 60 years to feel like you voted. But you feel like, well, by God, At least I had my say. And the tyrant went, nodded like, Papa Joe or, Nice of you to come vote, and you don't know they're back there. You're going to throw them in the fireplace and, doing marshmallows. But God, do you feel good? Huh? Do you feel good? Yes. I made my decision about free will. Just think about Papa Joe. Kings, the gods, the institutions, collective wisdom. Glad to see you voted. What's left, an ordinary person could hear this and go, wait a minute, I'm beginning to catch the symbolism of that. All right, I'll get even with them. I just won't vote. Hey, I'll show them. I don't guess we're going to get to it, or nobody asked it, but there's a guy who didn't hear about that, about a guy who was somewhere, did anybody ask for it? And decided that there is no escape from our hormones except for those who know there's not and don't care. That was just that one. We're actually on a real clock. There's only going to be 3 minutes left. Well, Vanna, I think I'd like to buy a consonant. Well, if we're getting that late. Well, how about that? Worked right out. I'll just read the last one again. One man says that sometimes when he's out for a run, they'll put a guy who looks just like him up to running towards him from the opposite direction. I keep getting those confused. It's the religious that go, and it's the Papa Joes that go. Or sometimes they go, which should really give you the willies.